The examples that I've given previously were schedules, notes, images, Creo config files, things. This is meant to be a miscellaneous category. It's not meant to be something that we create files for and associate to WT parts. We're still seeing a lot of misuse for this particular type, and we're probably going to turn it off and only allow it for administrative use. So if there's a document type that you don't know where yours fits, again, please reach out to us. We'll either give you guidance or maybe we need another type. And it's not that hard a deal. It's a fairly minor effort to create a new document type and put it in here. Reference documents are all auto-numbered. So when I say that, when you create one in Windchill, it's going to give you a number. That number is the number you should be putting on the face of your document. Whether it's a drawing or a spec or a procedure, doesn't matter. That's the number you should be using on the face of that document. Do not pull another number from the parts log. It is preferable to process reference documents on an RDCN because it is a very optimized workflow, and it's over it in a little more detail here shortly. These can be processed as well on ECNs and MCNs, but should only be done so when you are also processing a spec or a WT part at the same time. If you're trying to just revise or release a reference document, we request that you use an RDCN because, again, it is optimized and most efficient for the organization. The second type are specification documents. These ones are pretty heavily used, and you can see they're kind of broken out by functional areas. You've got artwork, electrical, firmware, material, packaging, product, and non-CAD. Non-CAD is kind of a miscellaneous specification that can be any one of these functions, and it's intended to primarily be a drawing that is not CAD-based. Or when I say non-CAD, one of our primary CAD systems, so that are integrated, such as Creo, SolidWorks, or AutoCAD. Specification documents do drive a revision to their WT part. I apologize, my wife must be printing something, so give it a second. Okay. Changes to specifications do drive a revision because they contain controlling information. When you're changing a specification, you're changing a dimension, you're changing a material, you're changing some critical element that should drive a revision to that part number. Most of these specifications are manual part numbers. So you'll see I've got that covered here in the last column. Material specs provide auto numbers, packaging specs provide auto numbers, and product specs provide auto numbers. But everything else, you need to go pull a part number from the part log. These can only be processed on ECNs and MCNs. When I say processed, that means released. They can also be processed on development workflows or stage release workflows that are used prior to release, but they can only be released on an ECN or MCN. And documents should always be associated to a WT part. If you think you're just making a document, you're in all likelihood doing something wrong. Documents need to be associated to something. Otherwise, what is the purpose of that document? So think about that. I know we've got a long history of like, well, this is just a document. You're going to have to change some of your old thinking because all documents have a purpose. And in engineering, that purpose should be in some way tied to a part number. Okay? And it's best to create documents from within the WT part. I'll show you a brief demo here in a minute. If content is owned by another function, you can use empty, or if it's still not ready to go. And I'll show you both of those here in a quick demo.
Something that I want to add here, Eric, is that whenever we need to revise something in SAP, we'll now be required to include the ECN form to our ECN. In the past, if let's say we're just revising a drawing, we could only have affected and resulting objects as part of our ECN. But now, on top of that, we will be required to include the ECN form with the material master revision in it, so the DMO can process that.
Yep.
Once we're done with all these trainings, we'll communicate that in an email from our PLM site. So just for you guys to be aware of it.
Okay, so what you see up I have here is a windshield window. If I go to the related objects for this is just an example of one that I'm going to talk about in more detail later. But if I were making a new specification document, the best way to do that is to go straight to the part number, which is the WT part, and add new document. And when I do this, it's going to automatically check out my WT part, assuming I have access to it. And it's first thing, it's going to limit you to what type of documents you can actually create there. So there's less of a mystery. In this case, if it's under a described by, you'll see it only lets you do specifications. So it's kind of a self. It helps enforce our rules. If you create the wrong type of document, try to put it in the wrong group, it's going to give you an error. So this is automatic error proofing. It's only going to let you create the right type of document in the right place. Once you start creating it, now if somebody else owns the actual content, so what we frequently do with artwork, we'll put artwork, and then we can say no content, because I'm not the person that creates that artwork. And now what it's doing is just creating an empty document in the WT part.
Hey, Eric, may I ask a question? This is Mike Brown.
Yep.
So if, let's say we're doing artwork files, is it the packaging engineering responsibility to actually set that up then, since there's creating the WTs?
I would do it, yeah. As soon as you're creating a new packaging element with artwork, I would put that in there, and that way your whole WT part is structured. And then when you have the artwork ready, all you got to do is check that document out, check it in, and you're ready to go.
So this is strictly for new documents only, correct?
Primarily, yes. I mean, you can do it on a revision. If you were going from revision A to revision B on the artwork and you didn't have revision B of the artwork ready, you on B, you can change it to no content. And
okay.
Again,
oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Route that to the right function and have them update and replace the artwork.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Was artwork, okay, just clarification, artwork, was that a reference document previously?
No, artwork's always been a specification.
All right. I always have to check the spec because I can't remember, so I always look at the engineering standard to make sure.
Yep. No, that's
Thank
good.
you.
And just think about it, when artwork changes, you're changing the physical part, right? So if you just think about it in that manner,
okay,
that will help guide you as to whether it's a spec or a reference. So this is a very useful thing to say there's no content, because I don't know what it is yet. It's still in development, but yet I can structure my part, put all the right documents under it, and be done. And we're using this very well right now with tech communications for manuals. We put this in, we make it empty, and we actually route it on the ECN to them, and then they put the artwork in. And it takes engineering out of the role of being the shepherd, and puts the responsibility on the right people. And it's working very well. TechCom actually loves it, so we want to expand this and use it more. So I wanted to show this to you. And the other advantage of creating the document here is that, one, it creates the document and it creates the association at the same time. So again, it helps to enforce the rules, and then you don't forget about it later. It's pretty easy to create a document, create the WT part, and then you get sidetracked and you forget to go back and associate it. And again, a document that's not associated doesn't really serve any purpose. So
I had one quick question on that, Eric. So let's say we associate it to that particular WT bomb, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that artwork relates to, a bunch of other SKUs. So do we have to then manually associate that to those SKUs when we do our ECN, right?
In your case, you're going to be doing packaging artwork, which should really only tie to one part number.
Not necessarily. Some stuff is generic, used on multiple SKUs.
Yeah, and if so, then that artwork should be tied to whatever part numbers it drives.
Right. So you would associate it because. So, and then one other question. So I've done this before. You create a no content, right, on that document, and later on you change it to content and you upload the file.
Yep.
Are we going to have Marcom be doing that in the future then?
We would love to have them do that. I talked with George about that briefly before the whole shutdown.
Yeah.
The primary problem we have right now is that most of the Marcom people are not currently in Windchill.
Oh, okay.
So we've got
we need a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So it's
they need a technical person to be a gatekeeper to process that stuff, and then they could do their own discipline, and that person would have their discipline.
Exactly, and that's what we want to get to.
Yeah.
Hey, Eric, I don't want to derail this meeting, but we definitely have to talk about that. My only question is, how do we get TechCom to have that point person be able to deal with Windchill? Were they assigned?
Yeah, we can certainly talk about it more offline.
Yeah.
What we generally do is the engineer picks the right TechCom person that's on their project.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about this offline. Thanks.
Yeah, and we'll revisit it a little bit later when I talk about the ECN.
Okay. Great.
All right. So to do this, excuse me. The next thing related to documents is our ultimate goal here is going to be getting to an integration between Windchill and SAP, so we only have to do things in one system. One of the things that's important there is looking at the fields, right? So the number field in Windchill should match to the document number or the part number in SAP. In this case, this is the document example, and the name should match the description. This is not something we've historically done very well. We've done a lot of cleansing over the last couple of years, myself and Francisco. Previously, what we did was there was a random number assigned in the number field, and we didn't use it, and then we went and pulled a number from the part log and we put it in the name field, and that would have made it next to impossible to ever integrate those things, because how do you separate the name field, first the number and the description? And so we did again a lot of cleansing, went back and tried to fix them. There's still a lot in there, but we've tried to hit most of the heavy hitters. And what you would see were things like this. Now in this case, this was actually since go live with the new documents, and this did provide an auto number here, but somebody did not understand that was the number they were supposed to be using. They went to the parts log and pulled their own number. So now we've got a compound problem here. I don't know which number is the right number. I'm going to assume it's this one because that's, since they pulled it, probably the one they put on the document. But the only way I would know for sure would be to open it. And second problem here is there's no name. I don't know what this document is. All I know is it's a product spec. So I would, if they related it properly, hopefully I would be able to discern it, but basically there's nothing I won't know anything about this document without opening it. And that's what we want to avoid. You should be able to know what it is before opening the content. So this is not what we want. We want a number in the number field, a name or a description in the name field. And overall, it seems like most people are finally getting this. It's gotten much better over the last few months, so keep going in that direction.
How do you find an auto-generated number if it's not associated to anything?
Right. That's a very good question, Dave. So yes, one reason that's another reason to do the association up front, because then when you do that, the number really becomes.
Your best bet after that would be description, right?
But yes, you can. There's multiple other ways of doing it. Then you can then search for the type. So you're looking for a product document. So let's say I'm looking for the PRD for a certain project. I can then search only product specifications if I want, and then I could look in the name field. So I could do a compound search. I could look for just this type and look for, say, Phoenix, right? And then in the name field, I could put asterisk Phoenix asterisk, and I'm going to find any product specs with Phoenix in the name.
Yeah, because what I've noticed, if I generate, let's say, a 188 spec, right?
Uh-huh.
It'll come up with a random number, and I have to pay attention to that number when it pops up, because once it disappears from my initial creation, if it's not associated with anything, I can't find it. I got to go search, try to find it. So
The other,
you see what I'm getting at?
So take my lesson to heart and do the association up front when possible.
Okay.
If not, yes, as soon as it gives you that little hovering window over the top of your screen, and you can actually pick on it right at that point and go straight to it, and you can add it to your workspace or other things at that point. But the other way to do it then is you can also search for last modified or created on dates.
I see.
So if you created something yesterday and you don't remember the number, you can go out and search for things created by you on that specific date, and you'll get a list. And hopefully that's a pretty small list, but honestly, these are all great questions, Dave. And
I don't want to slow you down. It's something that's coming up. If you don't catch that number, you're out of luck, man.
Yep. And I will touch on that a little bit more later. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Sorry for the question.
No. These are good questions. I want questions.
Okay.
Yeah, you have a lot of content though, so. All right. To talk about the reference document workflow briefly. So for those of you who did participate in the survey that we pushed out in November, thank you. We got some good feedback on the reference document workflow. We had a little under half of the people participated or said they have used a reference document workflow, and we got about a 7.5 out of 10 in the rating. Then I want to talk briefly about the life cycle for a reference document. So a reference document, when it's created, is created in the state of draft. Then when you put it on an RDCN, or an ECN for that matter, but preferably in an RDCN, and you kick off that workflow, it's going to move to under review. And when it's in under review, it's locked. So you can no longer change the content or do anything to it because it's under review at that time by your peers or a functional manager. They then have the opportunity to say, well, this is wrong, and send it back for rework, and they'll move it back to draft. And you'll do this until you're right. Then as soon as everybody approves it, says it's good to go, it's going to move to published. And published, once again, is a locked state. You can't do anything with it. It's just that, and this is where documents live for the bulk of their life. Then when you revise it to make changes, it goes to in work. And then again, on an RDCN, we'll go to under review and back to published. And you live in this cycle for as long as the document is applicable. And then should the reason come to obsolete it, it goes through an RDCN to under review and to obsolete. We have plans to revisit the entire obsolete process. We've got a lot of problems with it, but for now, this is what it works in. And we don't run obsolete documents all that frequently anyway. So you're going to be living in two circles here, really, and primarily here when you're in sustaining. And the reference document workflow. So I won't go through it in excruciating detail. But when you create one, it's over here on the left-hand side. And we keep these documents out on our Confluence page. So if you ever want to explore them in more detail, let us know, and we can point you in the right direction. Once you submit a reference document workflow, the first thing it's going to do is create a cancel reference document CN task in your inbox. That is there should, for any reason, you change your mind and decide you don't want to process that document, project gets canceled, whatever, you made a stupid mistake, that's one way of doing it. But when you cancel a CN, it is canceled. It doesn't come back. It's gone for good. And then if you change your mind and do want to release it, you got to go back and pull a new ECN number. That task will stay valid until your functional manager approves. At that point, this task will be closed and disappear from your inbox. So this is there primarily, again, to aid the user, and then when you need to cancel, you don't have to call Ron or anybody else to do it. You own that yourself. Then in parallel, the workflow is going to do a bunch of system checks to make sure you don't have things checked out, to make sure you have the right type of documents, that they're in the right state, etc. And if any of these fail, it's going to send you back an error and you have to fix it. And once it passes all of those checks, it goes to your peer reviewer and then ultimately to your functional manager and moves on. And from there to the DMO if you need the DMO to enter the document in SAP. And that's it. This is a very short workflow. It's basically a couple days, unless you end up going through a lot of rework cycles where somebody is out of office. This is a 2-day workflow versus an ECN, which can be weeks and weeks and weeks. So this is why it's important to use this one when possible. All right, I want to talk a little bit about revising, because we've had a number of problems around revising, and try to add a little clarity to the situation. For a starting point, since we have a lot of Creo users on today, I'm going to talk about this diagram. You're talking about working with Pro E and Windchill, is that you have your Pro E working session. So this is anything that is in memory that you have open in Creo. Then you have your local disk drive. So this is your workspace that is on your local machine. And this is the workspace most people are familiar with and use frequently. What most people don't realize is that you also have a workspace on the server side. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. Lastly, you have common space. And common space only exists on the server. Common space is where you do your heavy, make permanent changes. This is where things lock and unlock. This is where you do revises, check in and check out. So you can see this diagram. You can check in or check out from either of these workspaces to common space. But when you do that here, it's permanent, all right? What you should be trying to do is work in these two workspaces as much as possible. And you don't have to check in every time or even check out. If you're working on something and you're kind of doing exploratory work on some CAD, you can use continue. And then it'll let you continue to modify that CAD without actually checking it out from common space. And the command that most people are not aware of is that you can use upload to protect your in-work changes. So you're working on something on your local workspace, and a lot of people, you don't want to lose that work, right? It's good work, value work. You spend a lot of time on it, and you don't want to lose it. You don't want your hard drive to crash, etc. So people check in and check out. The problem is, again, when you check in and check out to common space, that's permanent now. And to go in and delete things from common space is very difficult, and it's even more difficult now that we have WT part structures in the system. So what I'm trying to express here is check in and check out should only be used once you know that you're very confident that that work is going to be implemented. Otherwise, use upload, because upload will move it from your local workspace to the server-side workspace, which is backed up. So now your computer crashes, it gets stolen, whatever, right? It's not going to be lost. You'll be able to get that work back.
Hey, Eric, are there currently any alerts that when you want to check in or check out, something that says, "Are you sure you want to do this?"
There is not, but at that point, I can tell you we've talked with several other companies, and especially once companies get to be a little bit bigger, and we've grown a lot over the last decade, they usually have much stronger gatekeepers in place for common space for this very reason. So what we're also looking at is using Project Link internally, and Project Link would be where you do all of these development work, and then there's a gatekeeper that then says, okay, you're ready to go now, and then move it to common space. And we're looking at that, and we're probably going to have to go there in the next year or two. But for now, trying to enforce a little self-policing again. So, in common space is where we do check-in and check-out, and this is where revise happens. And when you use the revise command, it should be treated as permanent. I get lots of calls, lots of IMs, lots of emails. And when I say lots, it's a lot. It's usually 1 or 2 a week that and somebody says, "Oh, we're not going to use this change now. Can you delete it for me?" And more often than not, now I have to say no. And in the past, I could say, "Yeah, I don't like doing this, but I can do it."
Right.
So that we have WT part structures, it's next to impossible. And without going into a lot of detail, that's probably way over everybody's head here that isn't a PLM person. But basically, it is where used. And so the document or CAD is where used, and then that part is a where used, and that part has a where used. And once it's in the system and somebody else has used that or consumed that part in their bill of material, it's a goner, and it can no longer be backed out. So
yeah, it's exponential.
Yep, exactly. Thank you, George. That's a good way of summarizing. So all I'm trying to say here is just please, I know it's a big change. It's different. We're asking people to do a little more self-policing and look at things a little differently than you have in the past. And just remember that common spaces should be treated with great reverence. All right?
I had a quick question on uploads, naming convention, right? Naming convention for stuff we upload.
Okay.
So, let's say we're working on a project and we create a bunch of stuff, preliminary things, and we want to save it so, obviously our workspace doesn't get corrupted or whatever. We can rename it after it goes in, correct?
Yes, as long as it's still in design, you can rename it. And even if it's in development, generally you can have a super user do it. The thing with it being once it's moved to development, that kind of implies that it's already in SAP. But as long as we do that review, yes, you can still do the rename there.
Right. So, if people are going to design certain parts and do assemblies and whatever they're going to do, it might be in their best interest to create kind of a good structure to begin with, so you don't have all of this renaming to do later.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And we want to build structures and develop them before releasing. And I'm going to stress that a little bit more later. And it's a little bit different again than what we're used to. And I'll touch on that again a little later. So thank you for all the questions, guys. These are good inputs. All right, this was just a secondary slide on here just to hammer this point home. I've got an example here of the terminal block that we use in millions of garage door openers. I don't have the time to go into it in detail, but this is one of those examples that I can't back it out. And it's got an abandoned change on it. And it's just stuck. So the only thing we can do is finish that revision, or undo the work, finish the revision, and say no changes. That's about the only way to get out of the abandoned change. So the two things that the other things that we've also found are incorrect use of the revise collector and abandon changes, as I just mentioned. So we've got to make sure that a change has got a very strong likelihood of being implemented before it moves to common space. Not exploratory work. Not and again, this is primarily talking about sustaining stuff at this point. NPI is a little bit of a different ballgame, but sustaining changes, make sure you're not checking those things in until you know for a fact that it's being implemented. Then use of the collector. So first off, there are collectors for just about every command in Windchill. Be rename, move, associate. Each and every one of them has their own collector. This is intended to show overall what each of those icons do when you are using the collector. And what I wanted to stress here is that we've had people misuse this and perform accidental revisions to large numbers of objects. It's happened 3 or 4 times in the past year where somebody has accidentally revised hundreds of objects on accident. So what we wanted to stress here is please take your time before you hit OK at the bottom of a revise window, because everything that appears on that screen is being revised. So you're responsible to make sure that you're not collecting more stuff than you should when you hit OK. And this slide, and again, we'll send this deck out, but you need to make sure your collection is right. We've changed some settings to try and default it optimally, but it's never going to always be correct. And this tells you what each of these icons do. I don't have the time to go with each one in explicit detail, but as we go farther and farther down this road of having full bombs in Windchill, this is going to become even more and more important that you collect the right set of objects when you're working on things. So this is a handy slide to keep around once we share the deck.
Yeah, be careful if you do a file save as of an assembly, for example. If you don't select it correctly, it will save a new part version for everything in that assembly.
Thank you, Dave. That's another excellent example. It automatically will add an underscore to everything there if you don't remove the additional objects.
Yeah, and the same thing with imported stuff a lot of times too. It will create a new object for everything. So be very careful, because you might have hundreds of items you created new that you don't want.
Yep. This is another reason that often companies have a change expert that is the only person allowed to use the revise command. And we may end up getting to that point where we basically have a Chuck sort of role, for those of you who remember Chuck. And you would submit your change request to them, tell them I'm trying to change this bracket, and they would go in and say, okay, for that bracket, you're changing this part, this drawing, this model, and they would revise it and let you go to work. All right. So another topic I wanted to dive into then is design content versus manufacturing content. And I've talked about this before, but this is something that we've got to get a little, again, it's a change in our approach. So what I wanted to start with was an example of a part that we make millions of every year right now, and highlight some of the issues. So here we go. This is a curved door arm that goes into just about every garage door opener that comes off the end of the line. Anybody who's been here more than a month probably recognizes this part. And what I wanted to stress here are a few things. One, I cannot find out what material this part is made from by looking at this drawing. The only way to find that is to go to a manufacturing spec, 190 AO429, which is the raw material sheet specification for steel coils. So this is a very Nagalis-centric specification in order to find out what material this door arm is made from. Secondly, there's no tolerance on here. I have no idea what this thickness of this part is. There's also it's painted black. I have no idea what that means. Is that spray paint from Ace Hardware? Can I dip it? How thick is it? How thick can the paint be? Is there any tolerance on the color? Et cetera. There's no information here, and there's not even a secondary link to another spec or process to even give me any more detail. Don't know what it is. Another thing here, there's this kind of vague note about these two bolt holes. No idea what it is or what they're trying to say. And the best I can come up with is that this is really an attempt to do GD&T by using a sentence instead of using GD&T. Once again, there's another note about material being in a UL file. I'm not certain why UL is involved in a metal door arm. Assuming that's a legit note. But either way, again, I'd have to look there to find out the material or the minimum thickness. And finally, there's a little trimmed edge that you can see here in Part A, and that is acceptable due to coil width. So again, this is some handshake between design and Nagalis manufacturing that it's okay to have this little trimmed up edge because they could use a slightly narrower coil of steel. So what I'm trying to say here is that a lot of this content is A, either missing, or B, Nagalis specific. And so if sourcing were to come along tomorrow and say, hey, we want to see if we can quote this outside, it's pretty much not in a quotable state right here. You'd have a heck of a time. If you send it out, you'd either get no quotes back right away, or you'd find out that they'd come right back and say, I have no idea what any of this information is. I don't know what steel it is. I don't know what kind of paint it is. You're going to have to give me a lot more detail to quote this. And finally, if you look down over in the revision history on this part and go over it in any detail, you'll find that most of the revisions on this are manufacturing specific revisions. Again, they're not changing the function of the part. They're not changing material or anything like that. It's changed. It's being revised for process. So this is really a manufacturing drawing much more than it is a design drawing. So this is just one example. We've got lots of them out there, and we just need to think about it a little bit more when you're making drawings. We want to target making drawings as neutral. Buy anywhere, make anywhere is kind of what we want to shoot for. And then if Nagalis needs their own drawing that has specifics information in for how they make this part, they can have their own drawing down there. And that's the beauty of having an EBOM and an MBOM. The EBOM has the design content, and the MBOM has the manufacturing content. All right. Next topic, WT parts. So the feedback we got on the WT parts so far, we had about a little less than half of the respondents say they're actually working or create WT parts or associate things. I found that a little disarming that it was that low. So especially since most of the feedback came from heavy users of Windchill. And do you understand why the different WT parts are important? Only about half of those people actually understood that or knew why. So this is another reason why we want to revisit it and kind of stress why that is important. So the first set of WT parts that we implemented a little over a year ago were the EBOM WT part types. Those of you, hopefully most of you are familiar with these. These are raw bulk material, ECAD, electromechanical, finished good, mechanical, packaging, PFG, and printed matter. The only one of these that was brought over from the old system that we did not completely delete and purge was the ECAD ones. I won't go into any more detail on that since this is we did the training with the ECAD group yesterday. WT parts should be used by design engineering, meaning NPD and sustaining, not manufacturing. These part types are assumed to be purchased. They're ROHs and HAWAs. And I don't want to get into specifics of SAP. I'm trying to avoid that, but you just need to think about the EBOM, again, being neutral. It should be, we can send this thing to Gallus and they can make an MBOM, or we can take this part and outsource it. That's why this needs to be treated as again, source neutral. And if you think about it, when we use Nagalis, we're buying a part from them. So if you kind of think about it in that fashion, I think it'll help you to make more sense of why we're trying to do it this way.
Eric, can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
So who is responsible for creating the EBOM WT part structure first? Is it a mechanical, depending on the project we're working on?
Are you talking about a finished good level, Mike?
Finished goods, let's say sustaining.
Yeah. So we're going to need to talk about that more at a management level. It certainly shouldn't be packaging doing it, and I know you're, per some of our other discussions, you are doing that right now. And in an idealized world, that should be the product manager or the product engineer that owns that bill of material. Right now, those two roles are not very integrated into Windchill, and we're going to need to talk about that because they really do need to own the bills, the BOMs for their product.
Okay, I don't want to get us off track. We can talk about that later, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Very good question, and I don't have a resolution for you in here.
No problem. No problem. Thank you.
Yep. EBOM WT parts should never have an in suffix on the end, and when I say in suffix, it's in 00, in 01, 02, etc. Those are Nagalis specific suffixes that are added to MBOMs. Finally, finished goods, meaning this type here, and recreated or legacy HALBs will have an underscore design suffix. And the reason for that is, and we'll talk about MBOM in a minute, is we sometimes have the same part number using EBOM and MBOM, but that's only when we had that part number already existing in the system as a HALB. So now, when we wanted to recreate that in the EBOM world, we can't have the same part number in both sides of the fence. So we had to go back to since the MBOM is the master, and I apologize, I don't have the diagram here, if I just do this. Since the MBOM is the master in SAP, we had to bring all of the SAP data in here. And we couldn't overwrite this. So in order to prevent that from happening, we had to go back and rename anything that already existed with an underscore design. The primary thing you should see those in, again, is probably ECAD, but also if we're going back in and recreating a subassembly that we need in the EBOM world that's been out there for years, you'll have to add the underscore design onto it because it won't let you use that number again. And then honest finished goods is the other one because the finished good MBOM is what gets pushed to SAP, and that number is owned by marketing. We can't add a Nagalis suffix onto it, so we add the suffix on the EBOM side, and that is now automated. So if you create a new SKU, G870, whatever you want to call it, if you type in G870 and hit create, it's going to automatically add underscore design onto the end. So you no longer have to manually type it. The only place you'll have to manually type it again is if you recreate an existing assembly that's already in the system. It doesn't have an EBOM today. All right. Excuse Excuse me. Talking a lot, All right.
Gotta drink a lot of water like Marco Rubio.
Got a drip over here. I need one of those little hamster. Okay.
That's visual. Nice visual.
E-bomb parts. Oh, the other thing I'll just note over here is E-bomb WT parts. None of these are auto numbered. Again, so you have to go. Still, we're in the pull numbers from the parts lab world. Then the M-bomb parts are finished good, fabricated, phantom, subcontracted, and SAP migration. These first four are intended to be very tightly integrated with SAP, and you'll see they automatically set the right material types. If you make a fabricated part, it's going to set to HALB E. If you make a phantom, it's going to set it to HALB E50. Subcontracted, it's going to set it to HALB F30. So this is, again, a preliminary or early go at integration. So when you export this, and we'll talk about that more later with Juan, it'll already have the right material properties in there. The SAP migration part type is not available for you to create anything new in. It's a miscellaneous bucket for a lot of parts that did not fit elsewhere. We have a lot of old material combinations that are no longer valid. We had a lot of old legacy data that obsolete parts that didn't have usage, and we didn't really have a way of filtering all that without spending weeks and weeks and weeks to figure it out. So we threw all those in this miscellaneous bucket called SAP migration. So you may see these in a bill of material once in a while, and that's what it is. These M-bomb WT part types should be used by manufacturing engineering. These are assumed to be make, so they're HALBs and FERTs, as I mentioned a little bit ago. I mentioned that already. SAP migration not available to users, except for finished good and legacy parts. These should always have an NXX suffix. So when somebody's creating a new one, a new fabricated, should have an in suffix on it. Creating a new phantom, an in suffix. A new subcontracted, a new in suffix. Okay. Manufacturing may also use the E-bomb raw bulk material, so that's this one over here. If they're creating a new raw steel coil, a new plastic resin, whatever it is, or vanishing oil, whatever it is that manufacturing needs for process, they will create it in this bucket. That's the only time manufacturing works outside of this window. And finally, WT parts, like I made the note on documents earlier, WT parts should always have an object associated or a bomb structure before release. If you don't have that, then what's the point of the WT part? You have nothing there to describe it. It's either an assembly that has a bomb structure, or it's a part that should have specifications associated to it. All right. Life cycle for WT parts and specifications. So this diagram will look a little familiar to you from the reference document one that we went over, but this is obviously more complex. And I'll talk about this. New WT parts start out in the design state. Then they move from design to development using a development state workflow. When you are in development, you can use the revise command to go from A to B, B to C if you want to create a new significant variation. Now, if you're at this point, you're still working on things, but you're under pressure to order some tooling or do a risk buy, you can use a staged release workflow. And it's only used for those purposes that I just mentioned. Put it on that, and it's going to go to under review for a peer review. That's not as detailed as a full ECN, but it's close. Goes through under review, and it goes to staged release. And this means this is basically establishing a baseline now of what I sent out to get prototyped or to order tooling on, etc. It's important to note that no implementation activities are going to happen here. No back-end tasks. This is not a finished state. This is it's a temporary state that's only used again for capital when you need to spend capital, and the design is not complete. Once you're through into stage release, you'll use revise, and revise will take you right back to development, where you can finish your design work. Hopefully you don't have to go back through stage release again, but you can. And at this point, you would finish your design and then put it on an ECN. And an ECN will move you to under review and to released. And once it's in released, this is where all of your back-end activities happen to implement it in Nogales. From released, if you do a revise, you'll go to in revision, under review, released, and this is essentially your sustaining area, where the part will live as long as it is a valid part. And then if there's a need to move it to obsolete, we currently do not have a workflow for that, and we're relying on super users. So if there's a part that needs to be moved to obsolete, we do it again through super users, and we are looking at a new process for this. The other thing I wanted to note is we do get questions from people saying, well, how do I know what my state of my object currently is? And the easiest way to do that is in Windchill. You look in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see this, and that is the state of your object. Also, you can look down in the system window that's on the main tab, and it'll tell you the state here right at the very top. First, it's going to give you a list of all the states that object can potentially be, and the one that it's currently in is going to be bold. This is it's a very useful thing to know and look at very quickly. Any questions on any of this so far? All right. I want to do a quick revisit of the technical data package. It is instructions with BA 2410, and that talks about each of the part types that should be associated to them. What I'm trying to stress here is the difference between an EBOM and an MBOM. So from the EBOM view, what you will have is CRDs, PRDs, CFMs, DFMEAs, design CAD, not manufacturing CAD, design, not design specs, not manufacturing specs, artwork, etc. This is not a comprehensive list, but hopefully it covers the bulk of it. And these are your EBOM parts. And these are the items that describe those. Outside, first thing, they can create additional parts as needed. They can have phantoms. They can add raw material here. And that raw material has its own spec. So their structure can be different. And then also, their describing content is different. They have process schemas. They have manufacturing CAD. So again, maybe similar to that door arm. Maybe they want to have their own drawing for it to describe their own process. Or maybe they want to have a flat pattern for a sheet metal part. An array of blanked parts, etc. That's what can be done in the MBOM. They have their MWIs, fixtures, process plans, etc., etc., etc. And those exist in the MBOM view. So what we're trying to do is not isolate people, but put the right content in the right place. So again, the EBOM view is neutral. This can be manufactured, it can be outsourced. The MBOM view is specific to Nogales at this point. And ultimately, for those who are curious, you can even have multiple MBOM views. So if we decide to make it in Nogales and make it in China, they may have their own structure. You know, they may be different, but none of those changes here should impact here. But yet you have traceability. You can start with this part and go back and look at the design content. And you have the connectivity. All right.
Eric, as far as the design content, so like grease, inks, oils, tape, Is that part of manufacturing?
So
That would be,
I'll talk about it a little bit more shortly, but the recommendation I will give you is that if it is something required by design, it should be in the EBOM view.
okay. Just wanted to make sure because,
Yeah. So in your case, if you're saying it needs 6 inches of this tape because that's what you need to pass a drop test, then that should be in the EBOM.
and inks, if I specify how much ink should be on a label, then I should specify that too.
That you don't care about how much ink, right?
Okay.
It's 0.00001 ounces of ink. I don't think you care, and I doubt that you even care what type of ink that is. Now, it's not to say 100%, but in that case, what I would say is we should have an ink spec that says, it needs to, the printing on this label needs to not smear under these conditions. It needs to not fade under UV, etc. And I know some of these specs don't exist today, but that's where we need to get to ultimately, so that we truly have what design requires. And our requirement isn't this printer ribbon. It's again a UV spec. It's a durability spec for that ink.
Hey, Eric, just to be clear then, the label would be on our EBOM because we need the label,
Yes,
but the ink to print the label should be on the manufacturing side.
that would be my take on it. And yes, we need to
Thank you.
work on creating specs for those.
Got it.
Well, in many cases, I don't even know how to calculate how much ink to use or how it's calculated. And yet we've been putting it in bombs for years.
Yep. And that's there, again, primarily for inventory tracking. And as a designer, you don't really care about inventory or reorder points.
Right.
That's a manufacturing or material handling activity. And it's not to say it's invalid. It just needs to be owned by the team that cares about that data. All right. So hopefully this is a brief summary. I could probably talk about this alone for an hour, but we don't have the time.
Yeah, this chart's helpful though.
Yep. All right. Briefly, I wanted to talk about linking CAD to WT parts. So Windchill out of the box has 5 options. And over the years, I know people, lots of questions and confusion about what should I use. We went ahead and eliminated 2 of those from our configuration because the 2 contributing types, the only thing they added was they passed attributes from your CAD to the WT part, which is something we don't even do. So we got rid of those. And we also got rid of the calculated link, which automatically was tying drawings to WT parts. The reason we got rid of that is because we had a lot of drawings with replaced CAD on them in assemblies. So, for example, the coin cell battery was replaced into a lot of assembly drawings. And so if you looked at the coin cell battery WT part, it had hundreds of drawings associated to it. And those weren't obviously valid drawings. So we had to go back and associate the drawing. So what you have here is the owner link, which should be your primary CAD model that describes that WT part. An image link would be a secondary CAD model. So if you got a flat pattern, or you've got, this can be used for wire harnesses, anything that has a flexible components or variable assembly would be an image link. And then the drawing primarily should be content link. There may be additional purposes for content, but if you think about it, primarily owner and content are the 2 important things: your primary model and your primary drawing. And image is optional when needed. Show this in a diagram a little bit more. The WT part has an owner link to the CAD. The CAD model, and the CAD model has a referenced link to the drawing. And what Windchill was doing then, it would create an automatic calculated link from the drawing to the part, and that's where we ran into problems if this part was used on multiple assembly drawings. So now we create this as a separate content link, and it's pretty easy to do. So if anybody needs help walking through that, I can help you out. But this is a simple diagram. So we've tried to make it easier for everybody to do this quicker and understand why they're doing what they're doing. Okay, a few BOM guidelines. This will summarize what we were just talking about on the last slide a little bit more. With an E-BOM, it should be structured and documented like a purchased item. Again, M-BOM, structured and documented like a manufacturing item, and per the process needed. BOM levels. In an E-BOM, we should really be targeting making these as flat as possible. Not saying make it flat, not saying don't add indented levels, but don't add them because that's what we've done before. Don't do it because this is the way the drawing is, or there needs to be a reason behind indenting the BOM on the E-BOM, and I'll talk about that a bit more. BOM levels on the M-BOM should match the manufacturing process. Again, that's what maps to SAP. That's where they need to put in their labor and routers, etc. The E-BOM, we should be putting configurable items as high in that BOM structure as possible. So configurable or variant items, these are pack-ins, these are your owner manual, packaging, optional things, etc., artwork. Put it as high as possible in that BOM structure, because now when you make a new Type 4, you make any sort of other new variant, or let's say that artwork changes, we're not revising many levels of that BOM structure. And where we got buried in the past was, I always use the example of the sheet metal GDO cover. When that artwork changed or that color changed, that thing was at like level 6 or 7 in the average BOM, which meant you were now revising 6 levels of that bill of material, or creating 6 new levels of a bill of material to change one item. So we want to be targeting putting that as high as possible in the E-BOM. And then for the M-BOM, it needs to go where it needs to go. So the artwork needs to be down at level 7, because that's where they're doing silk screening. They can put it where they need to put it. Assemblies. These should be used when needed for design control or reuse. So kind of to reiterate what I was saying above, assemblies are good, but think about why you're creating them. Is it needed because I'm putting dimensions on the drawing at this level that need to be QC'd? Is it an assembly that's reused in multiple products? Is it a serviceable assembly? Those should be the kind of questions you're asking yourself before you make a subassembly. And in the M-BOM, assembly should be used when, again, needed for manufacturing process. I sound a little bit like a broken record over there, but we already know kind of as a company what an M-BOM is. Well, the E-BOM is really the side that's new to us. Bulk materials, per the question that came up a little bit ago, we really should only be present over here when they're controlled by design engineering. So again, if we're putting oil in a gearbox or grease, and you know exactly how much needs to be in there, I'm putting 1 quart of oil, then obviously it should be in the E-BOM because I'm controlling that. Otherwise, if it's ink and I need to specify that ink, we should be targeting putting specifications over here, not the actual part. M-BOM, obviously, they need the bulk materials they need to manufacture. And raw materials, so when I say raw materials, raw steel, molding resin, etc., things of that nature, these shouldn't be present in the E-BOM. These should be controlled on the part drawing or via material specs. You would actually have the raw material. And if I jump back quick to document, you'll see here the WT part on the E-BOM side would have a material spec, maybe it has a color spec, maybe it has any number of things. That's what describes that part here. Then when you get over to the M-BOM, they have their raw steel. So this could be their coil, could be the molding resin, and it has its own manufacturing spec, but it also has a connection link to the material spec over here. So this material spec describes the E-BOM and the M-BOM. And that's where we want to get to. We're not there yet. We're starting to do it on Phoenix. That team's running with this concept. So and we're making some headway. But this is really what we want to target.
Can you go back one, Eric, please?
Yeah.
To the full slide.
The diagram?
No, what you have right here is fine. That's it. Thank you.
Yep. Last thing I wanted to stress here is both design and manufacturing need to work together collaboratively to make this process work. We're not trying to create silos. And it's new for both people. As I say, the E-BOM is a new concept for design engineers, and actually taking ownership of the M-BOM is new to manufacturing. So we both know what we know, and we need to work together collaboratively to make this work. And once we hit full stride, there's going to be a lot of gains for both departments. Okay, one other thing I wanted to stress here in bills of materials, and we've seen this come through a number of times. If you look at this example, you'll see this part here has a little black dot next to it. That should be an immediate identifier that something is wrong to you. And what that means is we're looking at an E-BOM view of this B750. And in that E-BOM bill of material, somebody has put a manufacturing part. You can see here, it's a fabricated part. So what this is a downstream part that's been put into an upstream bill of material. And the problem we have there is that this is now called a part master, and it no longer has a revision here. The system doesn't know what revision of that downstream part to put here. So this is a no-no. If you see this, it needs to be fixed. And generally what happens, where this is happening, is the legacy HALBs, as I talked about earlier. We have a HALB already that was brought in from SAP, and now we're trying to create a new E-BOM that reuses that HALB. They put it in here. That's generally where this is happening. In this case, to avoid this, what you would have to do is create a new subassembly here with the underscore design on it. But again, also ask yourself, why am I recreating this HALB? Am I just doing this because I'm trying to recreate data? And if so, we don't want to do that. We want E-BOMs to be created that are valid E-BOMs, not just M-BOMs in the E-BOM world. So if you're confused about what to do or why or when to do it, again, reach out to us. I've got another diagram that I'm going to go through a little bit later that will hopefully answer those questions. And if not, we'll go offline and figure out what the other issues are. All right. So in the meantime, you see this, stop. And if you don't remember what the problem is, call us and we'll help you.
Tim, and this is something that has been added to the CN content error checklist. So again, if you run into a case like this, just let us know so we can help you. Otherwise, the ECN will be rejected, so you can fix this on the fly.
Okay, and what I wanted to do briefly here is brief demo. Show what we're trying to get to. So this is an example of a clicker transmitter that I have rebuilt almost entirely in the E-BOM world to a true E-BOM standard. And this should be the goal we're trying to reach for. So if you see here, this is a level 0 of this BOM. And if you compare this to a level 0 that's currently in SAP right now, it's going to be I don't know, 25 parts or something. It's much larger, and flatter, and quite frankly more confusing. But what I wanted to focus on here, and I've shown some of this in previous demos, is that the first thing I've done is I've sorted packaging into groupings, package groupings. So for example here, this is the unit pack. And if I expand on this, under here, these are things that go down to the single unit pack out. We've got the magnetic anti-theft label. There's labels that go on the package. This doesn't all show up over here because we don't have the pack. We generally don't model the assembled packaged out level. The bag, carton, the package, the blisters, and you'll see here that quantities generally all one. They're whole numbers because that's the unit pack out. Then there's the packaging display level, and you'll see here, label, packaging tray, carton, tape. And you'll see again, once again, these quantities kind of align because we know that this is how many per master pack or display tray, and it makes sense now from a engineering perspective the way these are grouped. And finally, palletization the same way. And here we've got stretch film and the poly sheet and the pallet, et cetera, et cetera. So you can now dive in, and there's no more of where does this label go? Now I have to pull up the spec to figure out where this label. I've now got it's broken down to where you can consume it in a more user-friendly manner, and more than likely you'll be able to drill down and find what you're looking for quicker, and get to it and have less research time when you're trying to make changes. So we want to apply intelligence to the bill of material in the EBOM.
I had a question on that, Eric. Typically, I've done this before where I created a 003 subassembly that had all the packaging components in it. You've broken it out into the unit pack or a master pack or a pallet load, right?
Yep.
So it's very good. I think it's a real nice idea. We probably should run that by. Would we do that, or would that be set up by Nogales Manufacturing?
You would do this because this is the packaging design intent. Then on the MBOM, if they don't want to have it grouped this way,
yeah,
they can flatten it out in the MBOM.
I see.
Up to them for how manufacturing wants to consume it. If they say we don't like these subassemblies, it's more confusing for us. That's great. They can consume it however they want. Personally, I think this makes sense, and I would want to use it downstream as well. But I'm not going to speak for them.
Right. So what I've done, just real briefly, is I've done 003s where it was a kind of a generic packaging group of components that would report to multiple SKUs, right?
Yep.
Kind of like a packaging kit. And this was something that, is done either on a lot of commercial products.
Exactly. It's the same kind of approach. So
right.
I set these up with our default dash numbers too. So for example, this unit pack out, it's -000, and probably the primary thing that changes here is the cart.
Right.
So now if you want to make 10, 20, 30, all this is the same except for pulling the cart and putting in a new cart.
Right, and that's kind of alluding to what some of the stuff Mike Brown was working towards as well. So I get it.
I hope
Hey,
so. Yes.
Just a question, though. I'm sorry. Somebody else asking. I'm sorry. But if I was going to ask a question, Eric. So if manufacturing changed it to a flat BOM, let's say, how will it be in SAP?
It'll be flat. The MBOM is what goes to SAP.
So, okay. So the EBOM, even though if we structured it like this, which we've been kind of talking about, it'll still be, we won't have our 003s or whatever we decide to use.
Correct. They would basically be design phantoms.
Okay.
And well, again, another goal we're trying to get to here is we want engineers to be working out of Windchill. Both design and manufacturing should be working out of Windchill as much as possible. We're trying to get to an ultimate goal of where you shouldn't have to log into SAP much. And when we get to integration, will pull more attributes and data back from SAP into Windchill. So we're trying to set up that structure so that makes sense. So you stay in here. We don't want to have to log out and go into another tool to find the BOM and then have to compare them. This is now where the BOM is. And then SAP is for other business process people, finance, sourcing, order, inventory control, etc. That's our ultimate goal.
Makes sense.
I would like to bring something in here. Since design is creating the new parts, it's important that you define the correct unit to measure, okay? Because once it's being passed to SAP, you cannot change the unit to measure. So for packaging, you will know that most of the parts don't use an integer value, okay? So be careful with that, because when you create a new part, the default value is integer. So once you pass it to SAP, as I say, it will go as integer and you won't be able to change it, okay?
Yep.
So my recommendation is that you use each decimal so that it can use fractions, okay? When you create a new part, consider that, please.
Yep, that's a good point, Juan. And it's another thing that we want to improve our process on, because ultimately this unit of measure in the EBOM is really how design wants to control how much goes into their BOM. But ultimately, if it's the sourcing unit, sourcing should own that. And we need to get to a point where we hand that off and you tell us how you want to buy it, because that's what should go into SAP. But that's a little bit further down the road, and we've had multiple conversations, I know, with myself and George and others about each integer versus each decimal versus ST. And I don't have the time to go into that right now, but it's highly inconsistent historically what people have used, and we need to get to a point where that's not happening anymore. So to Juan's point, using each decimal gives us the most flexibility right now, but it depends on how it needs to be consumed in the MBOM. All right. So again, as we drill down into this, I can drill down into the product, and as I highlight things over here, I can see that they're highlighting over in the left-hand side. And this, again, makes everybody more self-sufficient. And this is what makes part numbers less and less important. I no longer have to remember that an actuator is a 101. I can just drill into this. Somebody says, what's the actuator for a mini clicker? I just go over here, mini clicker, I drill in and go, which one is it? And walk my way down. Oh, there it is. That's what I want to look at. And then I can pull up that part number and look at the drawing or whatever I need to look at. And this will make everybody more, again, self-sufficient, whether it's design, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's service. Anybody in the organization that has access to Windchill can then come in and find that part. And maybe it is servicing. Oh, we need a service kit for the key ring. And they can come in and immediately find it. Oh, there it is. We need to make a service kit for that. And they've got the information. They don't have to call design and say, hey, can somebody send me the drawing for the key ring? They've got it right there. And I can highlight this and say show all. And boom, oh, there's my CAD model, my drawing, and I can open it right up. And once again, now numbers become less important. If these were random numbers, I don't care because I found the part. That's the important thing. And then the model and the drawing, they could be whatever number they are because I don't have to remember that. I drill in, find what I'm looking for, find the content. And once we get there as an organization, it's going to take a lot of those headaches away of, oh, am I making a dash number? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? So again, this example is out there. It's on the prod server right now. This is actually an active SKU that I've recreated to this goal. And this is my personal take on it. And for the most part, it's been the feedback has been very positive. And oh yeah, this is great. So, not trying to dictate how you should do it, trying to provide examples and guidance so that we can actually build better bombs for the future.
Eric, I know you're going to talk about eventually, but purchase finished goods is kind of a whole nother.
That is a whole nother mess. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't have time to go into that in detail today. I've got that down as a whole nother. That's a whole nother project, quite frankly, to iron out how we document and control those.
Thank you.
Yep. So to jump back, rules about WT parts before releasing them. All associations should be made, CAD, documents, etc. The CAD associations should be built. So if you see this little warning next to your WT part, that means it's not been built, and you use the build associated part command. The command takes seconds to run. What that command does is it passes the visual representation to the WT part. And that's very, very important when we start talking E-bombs and M-bombs, that the visualization passes downstream. All attributes should be reviewed and corrected if necessary. We want to get into a place where we're using more and more attributes, and we've got plans to do so. CAD bombs should be compared to the E-bomb. This is the design activity. So if you've got your CAD assembly, you can now go in and do the bomb compare between your CAD and your E-bomb. Make sure that you've got everything in there. This is your audit tool before you do a build. Make sure that everything's right. And to Juan's point, make sure you got the right units of measure and the right quantities. You can't change this stuff after it's released and pushed to SAP. E-bombs should be complete and reviewed, as I just said. Review units of measure. M-bomb equivalence link must be created. This is a manufacturing activity. So they create their downstream WT part. They create the equivalence link to the upstream. That's what passes attributes. It passes visualization and bomb structure to the downstream part. And the M-bomb should be compared to the E-bomb. That's a manufacturing activity. That's also an audit. They want to make sure that, hey, we've got 4 screws. Is that how many screws are in the E-bomb? And doing that audit, make sure that everything is correct. And finally, after a WT part is released, these activities can only be performed by a super user. So that's why it's important. Get them done up front. And if you're going to come to a super user and say, oh, I accidentally put 3 screws and it should be 4, I'll tell you the super users in general are going to tell you, sorry, you need to make a revision and go back and fix that. So put more due diligence in before it's released. Let's get it done right. And that's why we put peer reviews and things in place to make sure it's right before it moves on down the line. And if you're trying to get details just into SAP, that's what the dev workflow is for. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. There should be no reason to release things when the design package is not ready for release. Okay, on that.
Hi Eric, this is
Yeah.
Carlos. I have a question for the CAD associations. Sometimes we can associate the CAD. In this case, I need to talk with some super user.
Okay. Yeah, are you recreating legacy things or editing legacy?
Yes.
Okay. So first thing, thanks for bringing that up, because I didn't specifically mention that in here. First off, CAD, design CAD should not be associated to manufacturing parts, just to make sure, because we have run into that. I apologize, my son's a little hyper out there. Design CAD should not be associated to manufacturing parts. But if you're going back and trying to create a link to an E-bomb part that you're recreating, and you can't do it, yes, reach out to a super user, and we should be able to assist with that. And if you're running it routinely, let me know. I'd like to see the use case.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh. And then, does anybody need a short break? All good? Okay, I got a couple more slides and then I'm going to hand it off to Juan to go through the GUI. All right, some feedback we got on the GUI. One, we had about a third of the people use it that responded. Then we asked if they'd use the export functionality. This was a little disarming because only half people have been using the export, which means a lot of people were still key punching things in directly to the GUI, which means we've probably got different data between SAP and Windchill, which is what we were really trying to keep in alignment. And this definitely tells me that we've already got a significant amount of drift, and we'll probably have to bring the data back again at some point. And then the satisfaction overall is a little bit under a 7. I still have to dive into the comments a little bit more and find out why it's there, if it's crashing problems or speed or confusion. We want to make sure, and that's Juan's job, to try and optimize this tool for your inputs, and he'll go over that in more detail shortly. And to talk about this again, I just stressed it. All parts and MBOMs that will be created in SAP must be exported from Windchill and then imported into the GUI. If you're creating it in Windchill and then key punching it into the GUI, that's a potential for error. And if you're not creating it in SAP and key punching it into Windchill, that's a guaranteed mismatch between the systems. And we don't want that. We need to be making sure that we're matching these systems. And as a quick side note, I had a topic with Mike Brown the other morning, and it's something that we haven't particularly stressed before, but we did not bring MTOs in from SAP. So if you are making changes to an MTO, that will need to still be done the old way, which is directly in the GUI and straight to SAP. That's the only exception, really. And then to export material masters from a design perspective, you can do it from the resulting objects. Change your view to all CGI standard GUI export. Go under the actions and you can export this. And that can be imported into the GUI and it gets rid of all your key punching. It's going to bring it all in. Numbers and names, units, etc. And that's why it's important to make sure that this is all right. And then manufacturing, again, will be processing the bill of material. And the MBOM, they do it from the structure view of the MBOM. And they will change their view to the CGI standard BOM view and export that. And again, Juan is going to talk through that in some more detail. On that note, if anybody needs a quick bathroom break, this is probably the best point to do it. Otherwise, we'll keep on going. Okay, I will take that as I keep going. You may take over, Juan.
Okay. Well, always, when I started training with the GUI, I always try to clarify what it is and how it works and limitation that it has, okay? So basically, the GUI or CNF is just an Excel file, okay? It's an Excel file, but when you run it, you will never see the Excel file. Basically, it's an Excel macro file, okay? Now, since it is an Excel file, it has limitations. Some of the biggest limitation is that it is not connected to SAP or Windchill, okay? That means when I say that, is that we don't know what is in a BOM, okay? What are the components of a BOM or MBOM?
Okay? So that's something that needs to be revised by the user. The only information that GUI has is
The only
from SAP
information
are some
the
files
GUI
that are being
has.
downloaded every day by SAP and save it on the server. So every time you start or the first time you run the GUI, or it creates a folder on your documents path that is called CNF local databases. In this folder, what we have is 7 files, okay, or is 6 files. This is created only when you connect to the GUI, okay. So you're gonna have 4 files which are being downloaded every day, as I say, from SAP. Is the documents file, which has, obviously, as the name says, it has all the information related to documents from SAP. It has the material data SAP, which are all the per numbers that are active in SAP, and it has the obsolete file. So these files have all the per numbers that are on process to being obsolete or are already obsolete. Okay. You also have another file which is the ECN in process. That file contains all the information that all the users are making changes, okay? So in here, for example, we have the information, what materials are being created, what changes are being made, what ECNs are being done by user, saving information by user. So for example, this file, what it does is, if someone is creating a per number, if someone wants to create and again that per number that a user is being already making it will tell you that you should contact the user because that other users is being created in that part. So we don't want to duplicate changes or create a new per numbers. Okay, so that information is saved in this file. Also, there is a file from every user. Okay, this file over here, the test file has the information related to the user. In here we have the path of the user. We have some specific related information to that user. Okay, I'm gonna open this just to show you. In here we can see that my file has some data that the GUI gets when it gets open. For example, the path of my local databases, the server path, the last rows, for example, it shows when I was the last time that I logged in and the last time that I logged off. So these are basically the files that the GUI uses every time. And also it has the latest information, the latest file of the ECN form. Okay. So every time you open the GUI, what the GUI does, it goes and checks if the files that you have on your computer, checks the date of those files, and if it finds a difference between these files and the ones that are on the server, then the GUI will update these files. So normally when you open it the first time on the day, when you open the GUI finds that the new file in your computer so that it can work better, okay? And then again, the GUI will check again if there are differences between files. Since you already updated, it will not find difference and it won't update it again because it already did it, okay? What else? Well, I don't think that I'm gonna go deeply onto the MBOM creation because you should not be using that only manufacturing. But I would like to explain it here, this part over here, in the main screen of the GUI.
When the GUI starts, also pulls the default user for the computer that you're using, okay? In this case, it pulls my username because I'm using my Windows user, okay? So it will put it in here. And based on that user is the information that is pulling for everything, okay? As I say, for example, if I want to make a change that Mike is already making, it's gonna tell me, hey, you cannot do that change because Mike is making that change already. Okay, so sometimes people ask you to help them with a file. So if you don't change the user, from my I to mention as my it won't tell until user. So this is for that reason also. In here you have the limit of changes. If I change the user, also it's gonna date me the user quantity that he has. Okay. So being said that, I will only talk about the creating new part numbers or revisions. As I say, I won't touch the MBOM creation because you should not be using it. So I'm gonna do an example in here. When you select the division, you can select the update or new material master or DIR. You don't need to type the ECN number at this moment, so you can continue. You go in here, when you select this option, is gonna open this tab. You go in here, and you can, at this moment, at this version of the GUI, you can create part numbers in here, okay? You can create part numbers, but in the future, you won't be able to do that, okay? You can create new part numbers, new document numbers, and you can update revisions also. As I say, in the future, you won't be able to do this because, as Mike said, you should be pulling the resulting objects from Windchill so that we are sure that the information matches between SAP and Windchill, okay? Now, when creating a new part numbers, the GUI has some conditions. Let me show you. These are the part numbers that are allowed by SAP or allowed by the ECM form. Okay, these are the only part numbers that are allowed. Okay, for example, for electromechanical, if you select the material type as electromechanical, the GUI will know already that the material type should be raw, procurement type should be F, and special procurement should be none. Okay, but in the electromechanical type of material, you have a lot of different units of measure. That the default value for that unit of measure is each for every part number, for every material type. Sorry, but you are gonna be able to change it once you select the material type. Okay, so in here, for example, electromechanical is gonna put me each, but I'm able to change it to any of the other ones. Okay, so the same case for this one and for the packaging team, as I already told them. When you select packaging material type in Windchill, this will be defined already, but you have the option to change it to each or ST, sorry. Okay, there are
no other materials allowed to create, okay? As you can see here, you don't have finished good EBOM, for example. These are the only material types that are allowed by the ECM form or SAP, okay? So now, I'm gonna go back to the GUI. In here, for example, I already created an import windshield file. When you export a windshield resulting object file, you can, when you download it, you can open it. When you download it, also you go to the downloads type folder, and you are gonna see here the file. In here, if you press F2 or give a double click to that file, you can change the name and save it, whatever you want to name it, okay? Rename it, whatever you want to rename it. But if you open that file and you save it, that way it won't let you import it. Why? Because you edited. We don't want people to edit those files so that you won't be able to make changes to that file. The GUI will only accept original files that are coming from Windshield. Okay? If you save it, the GUI will know that you possible make changes to that file, and it won't let you import it only if you have the original file. Okay? So in my case, I already download one file, and I'm gonna import it just to show you how this will work, okay? So I'm gonna click this button. I go to, let me see, I have it here. This is my resulting object file, okay? So I'm gonna open it. Look, do you see? It won't let me. Let me download it again. It's weird because I already made some changes in here. Oh man. Mike, where is your ECM file? Your ECM number?
Did you say me one? Is that who you're asking?
Yeah, the ECM number that you were creating yesterday.
The one we're working on? You mean the 54379 number?
The ECM that you were sending yesterday.
Yeah, the 54379.
54379. So I'm gonna download the resulting object from Mike. I already have the view. As you can see, I already downloaded. I can open it and see it, okay, without a problem. But I should not save it, because if I save it, the GUI is gonna tell me the same thing that it already told me. That is not the original file, okay? So I can see it, whatever, I can do anything in here, but never save it. So I'm gonna close it. If I go to my downloads, you can see that it's in here. I can change the name in here, move it to wherever I want it, but not open it and save it, okay? So I'm going to import that file. Let me go to the GUI. I go to downloads, and it's in here. I open it. In here, you can see that the material type is that this material type is not allowed by the GUI, by the ECM form. So it's telling me, hey, this is not allowed, but I'm gonna continue with the importing process. So I click OK. This also is not allowed. So now I have this information, okay? This comes from the resulting objects. Now, in here, MRU means that material revision update. That means that it's updating the revision of this part number. It's updating from A to B. As you can see, this one don't have an error. That means that the revision are that the revision between Windshield and SAP, they match, so you don't have a problem. In case that the revision don't match, you're gonna have it in red in here. In those cases, you need, when you export the file, you need to send me that file so that I can put it according to your resulting objects, okay? In the future, with the new release of the GUI is gonna take what you have from your resulting objects, okay? Now, the other three part numbers, you can see that it has an error. The reason for that error is because there is missing information. For example, you don't have PPAP, that we don't know if you need PPAP, that we don't know the brand or the region, okay? So that's the only reason why you have that. But as you can see, that we already put in the material type, the procurement type, the special procurement, and the unit of measure. The way to fix this is you give a double click to DM, but since Mike is making these changes and I have my user, it's gonna tell me that I cannot make changes because Mike is making those changes, okay? As you can see here, it's telling me that this part number is already being created with DCCN. I should contact Mike Brown to review this and so that I can create it or he can make the changes, okay? So in this case, I won't be able to edit it because Mike is already making that change, okay? Now, if I have Mike user in here, if I change in here and put my user, I won't have any problem to edit it, okay? Because the GUI is gonna see that I'm using Mike's username. Now, as I say, I won't be able to change it, but in case that it will let me, then I will be able to put the value for the requirement PPAP from the LOB, the brand, and the ratio. When I have that, I click insert item to table and it will fix my problems, okay? Once I don't have problems in here, I can export the ECM form, and that's the information that is gonna go to the SAP. Okay? Any comments, questions? This is the only part that you as the sign should be using, okay?
Juan, but you guys mentioned, so the update existing material document, use like you said, well, actually, I think Francisco mentioned, if we make a change from a Rev A to a Rev B or a Rev B to Rev C, we have to fill that information out. And we got to be clicked on that update existing material and document revision tab, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, so.
Let me see if I'm gonna try to put your user, but I don't know if the connection is fast right now. Let me see. So I have all the users in here. You should be around here, Mike. Where are you? Here you are. As you can see, it already bring me that Mike's always checks 5,000 per now. Or he has the when you import or export the GUI, a file from the GUI, this is the limit of the changes that you are going to be making. Okay. In this case, Mike has 5,000 changes, which is a lot. Okay. The connection, it looks like the connection is slow because It's not bringing the data. It's going to take some time. But basically, if I have this user, where if I want to edit those per number that I just showed you, the GUI will let me do it because I'm using his username, okay? Any comments, questions related to that? Because if you don't, yes, tell me. You have a question?
Hey Juan, so are you the one who can change how many changes can the user do? For example,
No. For example, in here, well, the GUI right now is downloading information. I can change it, but in here you can change that number. After, let's say you see there is a problem with the connection. If I change in here the number, okay, when I click exit, the GUI is gonna save me the number that I have in here, okay? For example, right now, let's say that the GUI let me do it, okay? If I put in here 2000 and I click exit, the GUI is gonna save me those 2000.
Okay.
Next time that I open the GUI, it's gonna bring me 2000.
Got it.
Have a slow connection. Okay, so if you don't have any more questions related to this, that's it from my side.
Nama, question.
Yes, yes.
There's a plan to update the revision in SAP in Windshield? Because it is very often I am asking support you to help me to update the revision in my ECNs.
As I say, in the future, in the new revision of the GUI, when you pull the resulting object file, the GUI is gonna take as the good one the resulting object. At this moment, we cannot change the revision, and the GUI will put you the values from SAP. Okay, you put the values from SAP, and the GUI will let you export it, but you need to send me that file so that I can change it. Once we release the new revision, you import the resulting object, and it's going to take whatever you have on which. Did I respond your answer to your question, sir?
Yeah, so I will continue doing the same until it's fixed.
Until the new revision is released.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because also there is other thing. In the new revision, you won't be able to edit those fields, okay?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Any other question? For example, in here, I'm reopening the GUI. You can see that the GUI is not downloading the files because it already checked, and they match with the files that I have on my computer with the server files. Well, if you don't have any more questions, you can continue, Peter. Eric.
Next one.
Let me stop pressing it. There you are.
Okay. What I wanted to talk about next was the question that came up slightly earlier about what do I do in varying situations based on what I'm being asked to do. And so we put together this flow chart here, and it's meant to be a guidance for how to tackle your varying things. All right, this is idealistic. I know there's going to be some issues here and there, and use this as a starting point. And then if you're still confused, again, reach out to the PLM team, and we'll try to give you some guidance. So I use a type 4 for example here. Ask yourself a question: does a similar EBOM exist? This is unlikely at this point for this to ever be yes, but if it was yes, you would go ahead and create your ECN and ECN and duplicate your BOM structure and basically treat it almost like an NPD at this point. You're creating your new BOM, your new documents, relating everything, processing it, and you would process just your new EBOM parts with the GUI, and then hand it off to manufacturing over here, who would then process the MBOM. A similar part, which is in all likelihood what you're going to be having right now. You would create the WT parts for the new EBOM components, summarize these new structures in a spreadsheet, not the GUI, but in a generic spreadsheet saying this is what this new EBOM or new product should be, because in this case, we're going to make the new type 4 only in the MBOM. Process the new EBOM parts again, add the new EBOM parts to your ECN, and start your workflow, and then the manufacturing is going to create the new MBOM here. And each of these paths kind of follows the same way. NPD is the most straightforward because it should always be create EBOM, process everything, hand off to manufacturing for the MBOM. Productivity, does an EBOM exist? Yes. Well, then you're probably going to follow the NPD path here. If it doesn't, you follow this path. Sustaining. Are we doing an EBOM? Is the EBOM affected? So ask yourself this question first. Am I just changing the amount of raw steel that's going into something? Am I changing the amount of ink? Am I changing something else that doesn't impact the EBOM at all? If no, I'm going to jump straight to an MCR, because right? I'm making manufacturing process changes. Yes, you kind of follow your way up here again. Am I impacting an EBOM? No, go here. Yes, up here. No. So this is meant to be a guideline to tell you what to do in all the varying situations, because we have a lot of them out there. So we've tried our best to capture everything. This will be in the deck when you get it. I hope it's of use to you as a starting point. And if there's another situation that you don't think is captured, let us know. I'll update this chart. We can post this on our Confluence page or wherever you think it is beneficial. Okay? We're trying to support you guys in all the varying work that the company is asking us to do. And this is just a continuation of this chart, what happens with manufacturing. They're going to go in, do the same thing, create their MBOM, create, revise as needed, process the MBOM on the GUI, and then kick off their workflow.
Yeah, those are good guides. Thank you.
So, talking about workflows. Got a nice little icon here in the corner of a Swiss Army knife, right? Because you got a lot of tools depending on what you're trying to do. Those of you who have been here more than a couple of years, remember we only had everything was an ECR and an ECN. And that's all we had for a long time. Everything had to be processed on that workflow. And the first thing that we did to try and optimize was the reference document change notice, which I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. And now, to continue to expand on that, we introduced 2 more workflows early last year. The first is the development state workflow, and the second is the stage release workflow. I've alluded to both of these already, and I'm going to dive into them in a little more detail now. First off, on the development workflow, we had about a third of the people say they had created one or participated in one, and it got a little over a 7 review. and this workflow is intended to drive activities that are needed prior to release. And release indicates everything is done. Your design package is complete. You're confident that there's no design changes coming. That's when you release something. Prior to that, you should use a development state workflow or a stage release. So the development release workflow is intended to help drive make-buy decisions, to drive quotations, doing preliminary MBOM activities, so they can work. Manufacturing and engineering should be working in parallel. This is a way of telling them, hey, the EBOM is at a pretty good state right now. You guys can go off and start making your MBOM. And it's also a way, and this is probably the biggest use case for this workflow at this point, is to get DMO data entered into SAP DMO without releasing everything and running it through a very long ECM process. These activities should be equated with status 10 and 20 activities in SAP. We would like to make them even more tightly correlated to those states, and we have some plans to do so. But at this point, we can't make direct correlations between this. But in general, as a rule of thumb, what you're trying to do with the development state workflow is status 10 and 20 activities. This workflow does not release anything, okay? Just because you put something on there and processed it, it doesn't mean you're done with it. You need to still process another ECN to actually release the objects. And finally, this workflow should not drive an ECN or an MCN. And when I say that, meaning if you received a task, if you're a recipient of a task from one of these workflows, it doesn't mean things are ready to release. We've had a couple reports of manufacturing receiving an MBOM task and then creating their MBOM and releasing it. This is not a task indicating anything is ready for release. It's, again, a task to help tell you it's time to start working in parallel. And when you receive an ECN, that means the EBOM is complete, and you can complete the MBOM and process it on an MCN. That's what we're trying to accomplish with the development state workflow. Here is a view of the workflow. You can see that it's a rather short workflow. Rated through system checks, check objects, valid objects, etc. And then at the very beginning, we'll pick which activities you want to do, DMO, manufacturing, sourcing, etc. Excuse me. And then the first thing it's going to do is go to the CA2. CA2 being Francisco, he's going to review your selections, make sure that they look correct. And if so, changes or proceeded on, going to move straight to first the MBOM, go in and start working on their BOM. And as needed, sourcing and manufacturing. This is really where we're intended to do make-buy decisions, evaluate if the MBOM, if it's effective to manufacture it or to outsource it. We don't want to wait until an ECN to do this. That's way too late, because that usually means something has to change in the design content. And then ultimately the DMO. So once again, and then once that's done, you'll get an email back that it's your workflow is complete and it goes to resolved. So it's a very short workflow. Again, it should be a matter of days to complete this workflow, not weeks and weeks like an ECN. We want to continue to grow this workflow, not grow it, but to find additional use cases for this. If we need to add more tasks or reconfigure them, let us know. Again, we're looking currently at ways to more tightly integrate this with 10 and 20 activities.
So I have a quick question. So if you get something to 20, right? It means they could essentially initiate a risk buy, correct?
Excuse me.
We know.
Theoretically, yes, but what we want to do in those cases is use a staged release workflow.
Yes.
Talk about that one next.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is we have to be careful, right? So this doesn't get misinterpreted as a released product, right? We start buying things, correct?
Yeah. And in order to do that, and when we start more closely aligning our states between Windchill and SAP, all of this will make more sense. Most of you have probably heard me rant about the states in SAP. I don't feel that they're anywhere near adequate, because we basically race past 10 to get to 20 as soon as possible, and then we flip it to 30 the day that we start producing it and sending things out to customers. So we have more or less a binary system in SAP that's pre-release and released. And that's not enough to really tell you what truly is happening. And I think we need to expand our states on both sides of the in both systems and make more equivalencies between them. And I'm working on a master plan to do that. In the meantime, we have to work with what we have, and yeah, this will be more 10 and 20. The staged release is intended to say risk buy, and then ECN, MCN for a status 30 and beyond. Does that answer your question, Dave?
Yeah, I guess I would. Yeah, I'll think about it. I'm just trying to figure out what's a good example for using this development workflow.
Yep. So today, the primary thing people are using it for is to get material masters and preliminary bombs into SAP, so that they can get program managers and project managers and marketing people happy, so they can start doing 20 activities, loading, demand, etc. That's really what this is primarily used for.
So this could be used, for example, on a project where you create a structure, right? And you get it set up, and then you do all your financial work and everything, and then marketing can decide whether or not they really want to go with that project based on your financials and everything else, right? And they either continue and you release it, or you shut it off at this point. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yep. Again, ECN should be used when everybody's in agreement that this stuff's done. In theory, and I remember Jim Roberts saying this like 8 years ago, and I thought he was insane. But in theory, you can do a single ECN for a project, right? Everything is done that you need in these development stage release workflows, and then once everybody says, this baby's good to go, we're going to produce it. You put it all on an ECN and process it. Now, is that realistic? Probably not. But I use, for an example, Defender. When I did Defender 7 years ago, roughly, I processed 120 ECNs to get that product released, which is the opposite end of that spectrum. So what we want to get to is obviously fewer ECNs. ECNs are expensive. They cost a lot. They bring in a lot of people, and we would rather use these simple workflows to accomplish what we need during development. And that's where we need a few more tasks. We can add them in here. And if at some point we say we're going to route this to people to do the row intake form, maybe we do that. Well, we have to see what makes sense for us as a business.
These are more easily stopped or reversed too, right? More or less.
Yep. Because nothing's permanent here. You're not modifying production data. And that was the other problem we had with processing ECNs. Is once it's out there, that's data that the whole world can see. And when we were releasing things, we were racing it up to get it into, again, 20 and out there for visibility for everybody. Nobody really knows what's going on, and there's a lot more confusion. Let's not put it out there for the masses until we know it's ready.
Right, because I was just recently on a program for RJO Next, where I think this would have been helpful to accumulate everything, and then for marketing to make a final decision on whether we continue or we cancel the project. And it turned out they canceled the project. So.
Yep, that's what we want to do.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, the second one is alluded to is the staged release workflow. The staged release workflow feedback we got so far that 32 people had used it. Honestly, I thought that number was a bit high. Like, did we really do 32 risk buys last year? And upon digging into the data a little more, we found out that most of those were misuses of the workflow. And since we've talked with those users, that number has leveled out. Not using it nearly as much, which is good, because again, when we're doing lots of risk buys, we're probably doing something wrong. Scheduling projects or programs far too aggressively. This should be a tool we want to use, but not overuse. I asked if people understood it, and it got a 6, which does tell me I didn't really understand what the point of this workflow was. So those two slides kind of check out. And finally, then the feedback was a little bit over a 6. But again, whether people are misusing it, how valid is that feedback? I don't know. We'll try to get more feedback in next year and see if this grows and watch how many people are using it. And this workflow should be used for capital expenditure when design is not complete. Those examples are risk buys, long lead time buys, advanced tooling kit. This happens a lot with plastic injection molded tools and even sheet metal progressive dies. We've got the part 80% designed. We're pretty good with it. We've done some prototyping, and we need to kick off the early part of the tool. Get the steel block ordered. Commit money to the tooling designers to start laying out the ejectors and laying out the cooling lines. So when they can overlap those efforts with the final stretches of design activity, then there's gains there in the schedule. Objects are not released with a staged release workflow. Honestly, I would like to go back and probably change the name of this from staged release to maybe just a staged workflow or something. We had TriStar and they were very sensitive. They said, don't use the word release unless you mean it. But then they went up and called this a staged release workflow. This release does imply something. So these are not released. Like the dev workflow, if you've used a staged release, you still need to follow up with an ECN to say that it's officially done. No implementation activities occur, which I stressed earlier when I walked through the lifecycle states. And a revised command is needed to exit this state, which moves it back to development, which I also talked about back on the lifecycle map. And an ECN is needed to release these objects. And here is the brief layout of the staged release workflow. You can see here that's similar to the other ones. We create it, it moves on. These are all the automated system checks. We're going to continue to try and grow this more and more, so we're not relying on peer reviewers. We want as many automated checks as possible, and then rely on the peer reviewers to do the actual core review of the design. Once it's there, it goes through the tech review and CN content area review, because this is implying there's some pretty permanent stuff going on here. So Francisco is going to review it. We're going to go on. Francisco's going to pick your functional manager, and then the functional manager is going to approve it. Going to move on to the DMO, and sourcing, NPI, finance, and manufacturing. And that's it. And it ends. And you get an email back saying that your stage release is complete. So that's all it does. Again, no more. There's no implementation activities. So it should be a fairly short workflow again, a couple days, depending on how long your peer review takes. And it's done. And now you've drawn a line in the sand that this design at this point is good enough for those early purposes. And then you would revise everything to B or C or wherever you're at and go back to development and finish the design. Okay. ECR and ECN. So the ECR, we really haven't changed much at all. So I'm not going to go into this in any detail. We did create a more detailed flow chart here that's out there. The only thing that we did at all here is on an ECR that we added an attribute on the wizard for scrap involved. And if you do select the scrap attribute, it then adds an optional finance task. It hard codes a finance task into the workflow so they can review your scrap and make sure that they are in agreement with it. Aside from that, this is the exact same CR we've had for a decade, and a CR is required in order to create an ECN. Yeah, the kids go back to school next week, hopefully.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. We got on the ECN because it had changed. We asked if people had created one in 2020 because that was more or less the cutoff point for when we made the changes. We made them in late January. And we had, well, not quite half had created one. And if you had participated in one other than creating it, about 2/3 of the people had done that. We asked if you worked primarily on the front end, the back end, or if you really weren't sure. About 10% of people weren't sure. So that's why we wanted to revisit this and talk through it. And then the satisfaction for the front end was higher than the back end. We think we have a pretty good grip of why. And we're working we want to always strive for both of them to be improved. And we got a pretty good idea what's wrong with the back end, and we'll bring that up and then continue to move them both up that scale. On the ECN front end, I'm not going to go through the back end because that's a whole other training and generally doesn't apply to most of the people in this class. But an ECN starts like this. It goes through, you submit it, and like the other workflows, you'll get a cancel CN task in your inbox. Again, don't complete that task unless you truly want to cancel it. I've had 2 people in the last couple weeks reach out to me if I can uncancel their CN. I say, nope, you got to go create a new one. So don't complete that task unless you are definitely certain that it's done. The first thing that's going to happen is the system is going to evaluate your resulting objects and look for WT parts. And it's going to summarize those and use those logically to drive the cross-functional and peer reviews. Does that, it's going to send you 2 subsequent tasks. First, the cross-functional participants task, and then the review participants task. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to show you what those are. So the first section is the cross-functional tasks. Cross-functional is not a peer review. It's not really a review at all. It's intended to make sure that all of the required content is present and associated to the WT part. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. And the system is automatically going to select the cross-functional reviews that it thinks are needed based on the WT parts that are on your ECN. So if I look at this example, if I'm putting printed matter, it's going to generate a sourcing review and a tech communications review. And this is potentially so sourcing could do a quotation if that's what we need, or finalize their quotation. And this is, so Tech Communications can add the artwork, as we mentioned earlier. I can, instead of me sitting on an ECN waiting for them to email me artwork, I can actually kick off the workflow with an empty artwork document associated to that WT part. Make sure that I have them selected as a technical communications peer review, part review. When they get that task, they now know that means I check out this part or that document, upload my new artwork file, and I can advance this on. So now it's sitting in their inbox while they're developing the artwork instead of sitting in the engineer's inbox for you to wait for them to email you, and where you're constantly having to nag, which nobody likes doing, right? I know that was one of my least favorite things to do as a designer. So these part review tasks, again, the system is going to give you the recommended part reviews. You can deselect all of them if you don't think any of them are needed. If you're confident that your technical design package is complete, all the stuff is associated properly, you can uncheck everything. Because at this point, you'll see all the WT parts are still in an open and editable state. So still add artwork, add documents, add CAD, whatever you need to do. This is your last chance to do so. And when, hopefully in the future, when we get everybody really up to speed and really getting the goals here, we can self-police and get rid of this section entirely. I would love nothing more than to do that and simplify this front end even further. But for now, the intent is to make sure we can hand things off cross-functionally and get the work done. The other example we use it for is ECAD. They can then hand it off to mechanical to associate a PCB MCAD model.
You still have some ability to deselect some of those reviewers, is that correct?
You can unselect all of the reviews. Not if you're telling you to do that, but again, if you're confident that your design package is complete and you don't feel that the other part reviews are needed, you can select them.
Right. So, for example, you might select them initially, but then if for some reason it comes back, you can deselect some of them to streamline and kind of pinpoint what you really need reviewed, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, so Eric, just a quick question. Like, so for sustaining legacy issues that we do a lot of too on, and there's no E-bombs in the system, and we're starting out and we have to do some tweaks, let's say to the bill of material. Do we, since there's no E-bombs, obviously we're going to work as close with our manufacturing folks as we can. So once we get as much done as we can on the ECN, would you recommend us submitting it to them right away, since they're going to be they would have to go and put in the they're the cross-functional participation, so they would put in the M-bomb information, or do we work with them on that first and then have them do the effective in resolving stuff?
I'll get to that in a minute, Mike, where that's ideally supposed to be done.
Okay, sorry.
In these cases, you would deselect all of these part reviews because you're really not doing any parts. So you wouldn't need any part reviewers at all.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead. Sorry. Okay, thank you.
I appreciate the questions. I'm never gonna hate to say the old thing, right? But there are no stupid questions. And I'm trying not to give you stupid answers. So that's the cross-functional section. Second task we get back here is the review participant. Review is another thing. This is your peer review, and that's different. Okay, we give you these tasks both back to back, rather than selecting this task and then waiting, a day or two or a week or whatever it is for this to happen, and then come back and have you choose peer review. We thought it was easier to just have you select those back to back. That way you can make the work. In the second state, you will see everything is now moved to under review, which means all the objects are locked. This is now true peer review. Once again, it's going to, by default, select the peer reviews that the system is recommending based on the parts that you have. For example, packaging is going to do packaging peer review and an RSD DC peer review. So they can make sure that everything is good. But if you're, in this case, I'm releasing just a clam part, I think maybe they have use you would select the task. So again, on recommendation, you get a chance to edit that. You do have to have at least one peer review, though, or the workflow will reject and come back and tell you, you got to pick a peer reviewer. And the peer reviewers are broken out by function, so it's easier to select from a list. Manufacturing, ME, EE, packaging, etc. They're all in their right groups and can then be filtered. And if you don't know, you can't find your person, using the general peer review has all users in the system. So the peer reviewer completes, then it goes on to your functional manager and regulatory approver. We would like to get to a point where the functional manager isn't even needed here. There's been pressure from Larry, like, why are we doing peer reviews and then still require a functional manager? And I'm not, that's probably a valid viewpoint. But until we know we're confident that the peer reviewers are doing their job and checking everything they need to check, this is still here. And then you have your regulatory review. And once that's done, this is where the handoff happens that Mike was just talking about. This is where manufacturing gets a task that's called Create MCN. It's actually Create MCR. This is where it's supposed to be a handoff, because now you're saying the EBOM is done. You guys go off and create your MBOM. That's supposed to be the handoff point. And I know it doesn't work perfectly right now because of the lack of EBOMs and who's working on what, where, and why. We need to still figure out some ways to streamline this, but this is where that handoff is supposed to happen. Once that handoff happens, it does go to CN content error. So this is Francisco. He's going to review it, move it on to the DMO for data entry, back to Francisco to schedule CIB and the back-end tasks, and then the back-end tasks happen. And obviously this is a big area here. If I do a blow up of this, it's a whole nother monster. So I simplified it down to a single box. A lot happens here. And then once the back-end tasks are complete, the workflow closes out. Any questions about the ECN?
And that's, Eric, you said for processes that have EBOMs already. But if there's no EBOMs, we definitely got to work close with manufacturing on this, correct?
You would still do an ECN, but in those cases, you wouldn't need a part reviewer, and the peer reviewer can be very quick, right? You can just tell them in your verbiage what you're trying to do is new BOM, no EBOM is present. Manufacturing is going to create a new MBOM. Put it in that text, then the peer reviewer can quickly complete it, move it through so that manufacturing gets their handoff task. They create their MBOM and put it on an IMSI.
So would we be required then to put all the affected and resulting information on the
parts you are basic, so 5 parts.
If there's I'm talking WT, I meant to say WT bombs. I'm not the physical parts, but the WTs. Are we responsible that we would set it up for that, and then they would take that and then create their M bombs from it?
Only E-bombs that you're creating go on ECN.
I'm talking M bombs though.
Designers should not be working with M bombs.
Okay.
I know there's times we're doing it right now while we're working in this gray area of how to best collaborate and hand off. And that's great. Glad we're collaborating and helping each other out. But the goal here is designers should not be working on manufacturing data.
So
So I
I had a
agree.
qu-
Go ahead.
I had a quick question. So, for example, if I have a product I open up and there's no WT bomb for it, okay, which is an older version, I would go ahead and create a WT for for example, packaging related items, and that's what I would release, and then the manufacturing team would create the remaining WT bomb for the rest of the product.
Yeah, they would make the changes directly to the MBOM then. So, and that's kind of what that earlier flow chart I showed back, right after one session was intended to show.
Right.
So when I send this deck out, you can read through that a little bit more and make sure that hopefully that clarifies your question.
Yeah.
And if not, again, we can follow up and talk.
Okay. Yeah, we'll take them as they come. We can always ask questions, right? As long as they're kind of focused and concise, correct?
Yeah, that's what we're here for. And we know the process isn't final. We know there's a lot more to do here to make it even better, and that's what we're trying to do. All right. I'm going to hand this off briefly to Francisco. He's going to do a quick walkthrough of the MBOM workflow. This is not necessarily a workflow, it's more of a state chart of how things happen and the decisions and where they take place. I know you haven't done this for a while, Francisco. Is this going to take you, about 10 minutes? Or?
Yeah, probably 5 minutes we can get it done. That's
perfect. You still have time for me to close out. I got about 5 more minutes after that. So.
Okay, no problem.
About 5 minutes early. You're going to present?
Yes, I'm going to grab the screen. Let me know when you can see, please.
I can see it.
Right, so let's take a look at the MBOM workflow, okay? So first of all, this is how manufacturing engineers will get their changes done in Windchill and SAP. And in most of the cases, it will start with manufacturing receiving an ECN from design. Is it readable for everyone?
Yep, that's better. Good.
Okay, so as I was mentioning, they will receive an EBOM from design engineering. And here is where they will analyze the actual content of that design ECN, right? They will review and understand what is design changing or releasing. And from there, it can take two different branches, this process. The first one that we're going to review, it's the NPI. So in the case it's an NPI, here, manufacturing will have to create the downstream parts for this. And this can either be the FERTs and the HALPs. In the case of the FERTs, they will get rid of the underscore design that Eric was mentioning earlier. And if it's a HALP, in that case, they have some suffix numbering that can go from N01 all the way to N99, depending on the production area that subassembly is being built, okay? So once they're done creating these downstream parts, then they need to create the structure, as you can see on the screen. And these can have two different components, basically, the documentation and the subassemblies. In the case of the documentation, these can either be new documents or existing ones. If you need to create a new document, then that can be done with an RDCN, as Eric was mentioning. And also the other part, it's the subassemblies. In this case, it can be either Phantom or reportable. Now, on the reportable side, this can have multiple different combinations, right? Like subcontract, it can be a Phantom, a reportable, different structures that are according to SAP. And that's part of the configurations that we saw earlier in this presentation. So once the manufacturing engineer has created that structure, the next step is to create the equivalence links. And in here, it's basically linking the components from the design BOM to the manufacturing BOM. Now, something very important here that we need to keep in mind is that this won't match one-to-one necessarily, because there will be M-BOM components that we cannot use on the design BOM, okay? But for the manufacturing BOM, in that case, we can actually have E-BOM components, which can be raw, bulk, anything like that, a motor. We can use it on the manufacturing BOM here. So once these equivalence links have been completed, the next step is to actually check in the M-BOM components, right? Go through all the different levels that the manufacturing engineer is doing and just check them in. So once that is fully checked in, this structure, M-BOM structure, it's ready to be exported. But before the manufacturing engineer does that, they need to create the MCR, okay? And this, just like any other ECRs that we have, obviously this requires a manager approval. Once that's approved, then the manufacturing engineer can create the MCN. And at this point, they'll get the number that they need, and they can use that number in the CNF so they can export the structure that was already completed previously. Let me scroll to the right. So once this structure has been exported using the CNF, then this MCN is ready to be submitted. Part of that process will require the manufacturing guy to actually select the cross-functional approvers as well as the technical reviewers. These follow the same criteria and the same rules that we have on the ECN process. For the cross-functional participants or approvers, these can be unchecked, but the system requires you at least one technical reviewer for this MCN. So once those approvers have been selected, each of them have the option to either approve or rework, and by the rework, the originator will get it back. Once each of these groups have approved, then the MCN gets to the backend task phase of the process. And here I basically will select any backend task that applies as part of the changes that are being done with this MCN. And once I have selected those backend tasks, the MCN gets released. And once those have been finalized, the MCN gets resolved. Now, everything that I just explained applies for an MPI process, okay? The other branch that this process can take, it's the production changes. Let me scroll down. In this case, if it's production changes, the very first step that needs to happen here is to understand if the change that it's being requested affect fit, form, or function or not, okay? In the case it does not affect fit, form, or function, then they can create a manufacturing GRI issue, as you can see on this part of the flowchart, and then the process will start. Manufacturing will create their MCN, they'll have it approved, and get those changes into SAP. Now, on the other side, if it does affect fit, form, or function, as you can see on this part, that will require to create a sustaining GRI issue. And with this, sustaining will have the option, obviously, to approve. If they approve, they'll have to create an ECN, basically, and the manufacturing engineer would receive that ECN and start the MCR process. Now, what happens if sustaining does not approve? It's basically it. They can close the issue at that point, right? So these are basically the two different branches or routes that this MCN process can take. I don't know if there's any questions with any of this.
questions on my end.
All right. So let me stop presenting, Eric, so you can take the screen.
Okay, thanks, Francisco. About
Okay.
5 minutes left here, and we'll actually get out 5 minutes early. We timed this almost perfectly.
All right.
Sure, everybody is excited to go.
Yeah, I'll take 5 minutes anytime.
All right. So, finish up with what Francisco just went over. There is more training to come. We got some great feedback again from the users. We asked people in the survey, honestly rate what your wind chill knowledge was. And as you can see here on a 10-point scale, a little over 5.5, shows to me that what I've kind of known for a while, that the average users aren't super comfortable with wind chill and its out of the box behavior and what it does. They're more familiar with the Chamberlain workflows that we need to get this sort of knowledge improved. So thank you again for being honest and not everybody sending me an 8. Because honestly, I would have been upset because I know our users aren't 8s. This is what I was hoping to see, and I'm very happy. Not happy to see it that low, happy that it was honest. And we also asked users then to say, well, are any of these topics in particular of interest to you? And again, a lot of great feedback. You can see certain things that got a lot of people picking, other ones not as many, but everybody took time, or most of the people took the time to actually tell us what they would like to do. And these particular topics here, some of them, we covered today, life cycle states, deep parts, CAD relationships, and a few other things, but we can create customized little mini training sessions or mini training decks or videos that we can put out there that are topic based, such as using out of office functionality, using subscriptions, customizing your views or homepage, et cetera, upload versus check-in. A lot of these things we covered here today, but I would like to have more on-demand mini trainings and get away. Nobody likes sitting a 3-hour training. We could do more of these 15, 30-minute training sessions spread out through the year, or set up as an on-demand thing. I think we'd be better off. It's something we're going to try to at least start rolling out this year.
I had a quick question, Eric. So right, so you say you got all these mini training things. So maybe it would be good, like, for example, if we run into an issue on processing an ECN or we don't understand something, we get a quick pick where we can look at this kind of list and pick one of these specific items to just review, so we get a better understanding of what we did wrong.
Yeah.
So the next time we move on, we do it right. What do you think?
That would be, and that is something we have discussed. We would actually like to integrate that directly into Windchill. Unfortunately, right now, Windchill 11 does not support that, and I forget when it does. It's either 11.1 or 12. At that point, you can actually put hyperlinks right into tasks that we could potentially link straight to work instructions or videos. Truly make it interactive. We've discussed that, and we would love to go there.
Yeah.
The tool left us, and in the meantime, that's a little more bite-sized training that are located at a central place that you can go to and find on demand.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Last step then, to help improve the skills. BTC University, they offer lots of training, Windchill. We have licenses for this already. All you need to do is go out there and create an account. When you create the account, you'll need some of this information here. If you have any struggles with that, please let me know. We just updated our licenses, so some of these numbers may have changed. So if something chokes on you, you can let me know, and we'll make sure we update them. And once you do that, you can take training on demand. And these are, again, you can jump in and take pieces of training. You can go in and take the general windshield whole course if you want, which takes, I forget if it's a 3 or a 5 day course. But if you just wanted to learn more about documents and types, you can jump straight to that section of the class and go through it. And it's great stuff. Additionally, there's Creo e-learning out there, and all of it is available under PTC University, which again we have licenses for. So when you're interested, please let me know. We would like to even mandate some of this through our management system, and if that happens, we will be sure to let you know. Finally, PLM Group does have a new email address, and this email address is accessible to all 4 of us. As I mentioned on that very first slide, we kind of all have our own areas that we focus on while having a general knowledge of the whole process. So do your best to put what your problem is in the subject line. Use screenshots where possible. And when this comes into our inbox, we'll know who needs to focus on it. And Bob actually will flag them depending on who it should go to. All right. And with that, any final questions?
Hey, Eric, I know that Juan's a very good expertise on what he does. And I know that when he leaves or he's out of the office sometimes, do they have a backup for him just in case we run into a problem with GUI? Maybe Juan wants to offer up.
Certainly, I would personally put Francisco at number 2 there. Francisco can help you through a lot of problems, but obviously, if there is actually a code problem or a database problem that needs to be fixed, I'm not sure that he's capable of doing that. If I know he's at a code person, but he may be able to fix some of the database conflicts. I'd let Francisco chime in on that. Bob's probably the same level. I would probably be the last person, honestly, in that order if you're working on GUI.
Yeah, like sometimes we run into some code issues, but no, I mean, Juan, I know, is very helpful even on his days off, and so that's thankful that he's listening.
Juan,
You won't get rid of me, man.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that, Juan. I'm just saying, is there a backup?
Juan, we all know you're irreplaceable, man.
You see, George? As soon as I get a packaging, he just want to get rid of me.
and Bob is well aware of that concern as well. Come up from management, even about my areas of expertise, and well, who's going to step in when Eric's out. So we definitely need some more cross pollination amongst the 4 of us, and we're working on that.
Were you going to send out this doc to attendees?
That's out to everybody.
Great, thank you.
Right.
Thanks for good work. Lots of good work.
Very helpful.
Good work, guys. This was very helpful, and it helped clear up a few things for some of us. So
good. Okay. Well, that's great. I appreciate everybody's attentiveness. I appreciate the question. So again, keep asking. The last thing we want is people guessing. That's always going to be wrong. If you're not sure, ask. All right. On that, I'll let you have your couple minutes back.
all right, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right,
thank you.
bye-bye.
Ya voy. Tengo junta.